everybody. I'm Beth Hildenbrand, and this is All Booked Up. Today, our special guest is Mark Justice. Nice to
Hey,
have you, Mark.
nice to be here, Beth. It's good to see you again.
You too. And I'm going to let Mark tell a little bit about himself, and then we'll get on with the show.
Sounds good. Well, let's see. We'll go academics. Can I give some background? I have,
Uh,
if that's how you
Absolutely.
want. Yeah, I live in Ohio. I've lived in Ohio. Grew up there. I like long walks on the beach. No, um, I have a bachelor's degree in creative writing and a master's degree in popular culture. I actually did my master's thesis on Godzilla, so I'm a monster kid, and have some other postgraduate work in technical writing and things like that. And I'm an adjunct English instructor, and I am also a junior e-learning developer. So I do wear all kinds of hats. And I also have a couple podcasts of my own. That's where we met, Beth, on one of my podcasts, Between the Lines, which I'm not doing anymore because of everything
Oh,
else. Yeah, I just, between working two jobs and having two other podcasts, and something just had to give. And that was my most recent podcast. I'm like, as much as I enjoy it, I'm going to focus on my other ones. So my other podcasts I do are Unsane Radio, which is a group of friends. We like to talk about popular and unpopular culture, TVs, movies, cartoons, comic books, you name it, we talk about it. And then Heavy Metal Horror, where we talk horror and interview rock stars, which is kind of
ooh,
cool.
fun.
Yeah, talk music and metal. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I've started writing. I mean, I've written since I was in high school, um, and I started writing poetry and short stories, and never really did much with it after my undergraduate degree. And then I wanted to start making movies. Like in 2012, I'm like, I think I was inspired too much by the Little Rascals, watching them do these crazy spectacles of these poor kids. I'm like, yeah, I can do a movie. Why not? So I started writing and made some movies. And I thought, because I was afraid to do long fiction because I was worried that I couldn't do dialogue. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I wrote 3 scripts. That's nothing but dialogue. So that's when I started writing, long fiction, and found it to be really kind of therapeutic, and not just fiction, nonfiction as well, as what we're going to talk about. But yeah, I haven't written for a while. I kind of got stuck in halfway through my 5th book, and then kind of hit a wall, and I just haven't come back to it. But I know I need to. It's like a monkey gnawing at the back of my neck saying, write me, God damn it, write me. So I need to finish that. So
Yes, you do. Get
there's
on
me.
it.
Yeah, I
Get
know.
on. Get on
Yeah,
it.
I got some
What's
people
wrong
going,
with
hey,
you?
when are you going to finish this book? I'm like, I'm going to let AI finish it. Here's my,
Yes.
just, you
Well,
got my
I
script.
see Janet Byers is here this morning. Hi, hon, and Nina. And Janet is waiting for me to finish my book so I can give it to her to edit. And now that I'm over the pneumonia, I will have it to you very soon. Boy, that just pushed everything so far back for me. So, um, let's talk about the kittens because I know everybody's worried about the kittens, and then we'll get on to the books.
I
I've
didn't
been
know the kittens had
following the
made such a big.
kittens.
Yeah, well, the kittens at during week 4, I put them outside because they were crawling around and they were ready to be outside, but mostly because the mom, Georgie, would wake me up every 2 hours at night when I'm trying to sleep. I have insomnia anyway, so getting sleep is rare enough, let alone being woken every 2 hours. So after 3 weeks of that, I was beyond just out of my mind. Just beyond exhausted, and this is insane. So they're outside, and I've seen them crawling around. I hear them, but so as far as I know, they're doing just fine. But we have other feral cats that still live outside, and every female feral cat, because they just somehow gravitate toward us, then they like realize, oh, these cats are getting fed, let's just stay here. Well, they all got pregnant, so we had 4 litters of kittens, and we think we have 2 more on the way.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
well,
maybe
yeah.
not yay.
Oh, yeah. So if anyone out there wants a cat, hey, come on over and get 1 or 2 or 12. You're welcome to them.
Okay, so Ohio is bursting with kittens.
Yeah,
Everybody get a hold of Mark.
mostly our garage or our deck, but yes. So, but they live under the deck. They come out, they get fed a couple times a day. I mean, they're living life. They're fine.
I've
But
been following Mark's Facebook page, and the kittens are very prominent. Uh,
lately, yeah, they have been, because I thought, man, we have these kittens, because Georgie was the one she was in the house, because the feral cats became indoor outdoor cats, which was fine at the time, but now I'm hyper allergic to poison ivy, and so now I'm kind of for the last 3 weeks I've had it finally getting rid of on my arm and on my legs. It's because the cats would rub against me. I'm like, oh, I can't have that. I'm sorry. So now they've adjusted to being outdoor cats again. They still want to come in. I'm like, no, 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 you can't stay. Sorry, you're safe there. No more cats inside. So
oh, you should have brought up poison ivy. I'm always taking off on tangents. So yesterday I had the cable man here for 3 hours. They are hooking the whole town up to fiber optics.
okay.
And this poor cable man is out here, and apparently the whole backside of my house is poison ivy.
Oof.
And this poor cable man had to go through this poison ivy to get to whatever it is he was doing out there. And yeah, I was like, okay, well, you know what? I'm not going to feel bad for you because you have just bored holes into my 200-year-old house to redo this cable. I don't like that. My house is my baby. It
Sure.
was the first house built on this street. I have actually written books set in this house,
Yeah.
and he's puncturing it. He's wounding my baby.
That's what you
just
get for
for
wanting to be in the 21st century, Beth. I mean,
Exactly.
come on.
Yeah, just for this cable.
Yeah.
I was so upset. Yeah, it's like, okay, you have to come turn in your cable equipment and get updated cable equipment. Okay. So I go to do this, and then they tell me, oh, well, now the man has to come out and hook you up to the fiber optics.
Of course he does.
I'm like, okay, well, this isn't going to cost you anything. Okay. So I take my stuff in there. Oh, no, you didn't need to bring your stuff. You just throw that away. So after carting bags full of equipment into the cable company, no, I didn't need to do that. So then, yeah, it was just one of those days where, okay, it's now time for the migraine medication.
Mm-hmm.
Because now after 3 hours, I finally have all this hooked up. I have to learn how to work all this new stuff. I have holes in my home. And yeah. Okay, so there's the cable story. Now let's get on to Mark's book, Toxic. I'm almost done. I have been reading,
Oh,
and
nice.
it's a wonderful book. A little controversial for some people.
For some people.
For some
Hopefully,
people,
eye-awakening for those same people.
yes.
I don't
Uh,
think it will be, but I'm hoping.
so why don't you tell us a little bit what got you to, what made you write this book?
Well, realizing how therapeutic my first two books were to write, processing huge emotions, depression, anger, those kinds of things. So, like, in a way that was beyond storytelling. I really didn't intend to write this book. I grew up in a very fundamentalist Christian household. That's most of my life has been spent struggling with my faith. Um, I say struggling not because I wanted to go out and be sinful, as much because everything was a sin, so it didn't fucking matter. What you did. What I was struggled with was things that didn't make sense in the Bible. Like at age 8, I already had the cognitive dissonance going on in my head. Like, if Satan's so bad, why does God let him live? Why didn't you just kill him and be done? If people were so bad, why did you wait till the whole world was filled with evil before you intervene, like you did in the story of Jonah? Where he says, hey, here's this city, why don't you go preach to it? Like, all these contradictions that even as an 8-year-old just didn't make sense to me. So through a series of getting back in a relationship with God, I'll put that in quotes, and trying to just figure out, what it was that I believed, going through a belief in a God without religion, all kinds of things. It all came down to the same kind of ideas, but it was actually through reading the Bible again that when I got to Ezekiel, the whole idea about what's going to happen in the new, supposedly the millennial temple, when Jesus comes back and then God goes back to animal sacrifices. I'm like, okay, all right, I'm done. You know what? No, that was it. after 40 years of struggle, I was just so angry and fed up with all the stuff I had put myself through as a Christian. The self-hatred, the loathing, the feeling of guilt, the feeling of terrified that Jesus is going to come back right in the middle of me saying, fuck, and I'm going to go to hell or whatever. And and it just started coming out. Like I just started writing for no purpose at all. And actually, some of that chapter ends up in the burst boil. The first thing, it's where I felt like I've got to squeeze all this religious pus out of me, this cancer that's just eating me. And I started writing, and a couple hours later, I'd written 40 pages. I'm like, oh, there's something to this. So I had to get the emotions out and deal with all the anger and all the stories that made no sense. I just went through and started like, here's every Bible story that just makes no sense at all. The Tower of Babel, the flood myth, and like once I got it all down, then I brought my academic kind of acumen to it. Like, okay, let's because I know the Bible, I know the scriptures, but let's dig a little deeper into finding toxic doctrine. Let's find examples of this. Let's do some more research into it to kind of add. This is not just my opinion as an angry former Christian, but things like the doctrine. I know the doctrine from the inside out because I used to be a Christian. So my point in writing Toxic was to try to argue to the Christian, like, look, I understand what you believe, and I understand that Christianity is really based on cherry picking because the church is really good at finding the 3-4 things that sound really nice, but they conveniently ignore all the horrible bits. Let's not talk about all the rape and the incest and the pedophilia and the child sex trafficking that Israel was into. Let's not do those things. Or things like teaching the doctrine of the Bible is one whole garment. It's in perfect harmony with itself. But let's ignore the 1,000 contradictions, and let's ignore the fact that, like, the flood myth was already 1,200 years old when whoever wrote Genesis snuck it in there. Let's ignore those things. So it was about like, okay, I'm going to write about everything in the Bible that the church tends to ignore because it contradicts the story that Christians have been taught, that God is good all the time. He's love and this and that. And I'm like, no, I'm a hole poker. I'm going to show you where God isn't good. God is loving. No, God is patient. No, I will show you in the Bible. And that's what I use. As you read, 90% of the stuff is here's the scriptures that will prove this concept or this theory wrong. And so I really tried to present it in a way that allowed me to vent my anger and my frustration, decades of self-inflicted humiliation and self-inflicted guilt about not being good enough for God and all that bullshit. And also coming into play like, look, Christianity is a toxic cancer. It is a horrible religion that says it's about love, but it's really not, And so I just really wanted to, once I realized this was here, I spent, it was a quick write. I mean, 2 months,
Wow.
not even that, maybe. I mean, most of that was like editing and refining because I got it all out. And then, backing it up with made sure I had enough scripture. Here's the evidence. Here's what I believe. Here's what the scripture actually says. And so let's poke this argument. And then finding more examples of toxic doctrine, like, let's talk about incest and how the excuses that Christians give, theologians. Well, there weren't as many genes. The gene pool wasn't impure at the time. And so that's why God said it was okay to have sex with your family. Like, no, what you are ignoring the whole big thing of like, I don't want to have sex with mommy. Well, we have Adam and Eve had 2 sons. Let that sink in. Where did everyone else come from? But we also see another contradiction where with Cain and Abel, when Cain's like, oh, these other people, they're going to kill me. Like, where did these other people come from? Already we see little sneaking little bits of like, wait a minute, the whole story is not here. So, but God seems to be okay with incest and rape and infanticide. God loves to murder babies. So I just spent time to really focusing on the things that Christians tend to avoid, churches tend to avoid teaching about, and say, look, if you're going to say you're a Christian and you're going to say this is God's word and all of it is God's word, then you better talk about these things too. And you better make some kind of a judgment or an assessment or come to peace with saying, yes, I worship a God that says it's great to have sex with children. Let's do that. And so I think that's why a lot of Christians have tended to avoid reading toxic because they don't want to have that mirror put in front of their face, because they will like, no, and they will find some excuse to rationalize it away, because that's what the doctrine teaches. And so I come as a former Christian, a non-believer now, and a happy apostate, and to try to expose the the religion for just how caustic and how contradictory it really is.
Alrighty then.
Well, there it is. Okay, Mark, thanks. You've been here. Thank you. You've been watching Beth.
Okay, well, it's been nice talking to you, and we're done.
All right, that was great. I'm going to go and smoke a cigar now.
Well, as I told you, I still do identify as Christian. I have a problem with religions, religious organizations in general. I tend to believe they're cults, every last one of them. And that's from personal experience, for being shunned from the Mennonite church, for leaving an abusive marriage. I tend to think if a woman is in an abusive marriage and is looking to get out of it, Christian charity begins at home, or so they say. You should, a church should try and help that person, not turn them away, or literally, as shunning does, turn their backs on that person.
Yeah, or follow the Old Testament rule of how big of a stick can I hit my wife with, to keep her in line. Yeah,
exactly.
Let me trade her off for those 12-year-old, all the virgins, just like the tribe of Israel did.
We'll stone her to death, or
right. It's so lovely that even after 3,000-4,000 years after these idiotic kinds of rules were made, that some people still follow them. So yeah, it's nice.
So and I tend to view religious organizations as created by men, not God. All religious doctrine was created by a human man.
Yes, who says God's speaking through me? So
exactly.
Listen to him. Right.
And men are fallible, just like we have our politics. You're one side or the other, and people do not want to hear anything against that side.
Right. They have defenses built in to ignore it, or to describe it away.
They refuse to hear any kind of argument that maybe is against their beliefs, and just like with religion.
It's doublethink. I refer to the Orwellian notion of doublethink.
Exactly.
Where the Christians can hold two contradictory views of God at the same time. They always say God is good all the time, but they're okay with God murdering David's baby when God's own rules said David should have been the one who was put to death because of what he did. And so God's like, oh, shit, I made that rule, but I really wanted David to be God. So let's just kill his baby instead. Great. Anyone okay with that?
Yes, but see, David was also allowed to dance in the street and get drunk.
He was naked.
And exactly. Yeah. And he was allowed, but nobody else was.
And I liked David's honesty when I was still struggling with my faith after going through a nasty divorce. I was taking solace in that, and that David, it was very honest with his relationship with God. When he was angry, he would say, God, are you there? Are you listening to me? Or where are you? And then the next psalm would be like, you're the best thing since sliced bread. So it was that sense of honesty that I was beginning to try to approach God. But now I just look at it as like, I just see all the things that are glaring, that are opposite of the doctrine. Like, God says you have free will. No, the Bible has so many examples of God trampling free will, whether it's Pharaoh, God hardened his heart like 6 times, whether it's God sent tormenting spirits to Saul, to torment him. There's God murders Jonah to get him to do what he wants. They're just like, you can't say God has free will. So I kind of like bringing those things up. That's the point of bringing up all these contradictions. Like, here's your doctrine. Here's what you are taught to say and taught to believe. And I will show you where your Bible has the complete opposite view. So you have to be forced with No, we're going to hold both. We're going to hold both things, ideally, because God's always good. you know, hopefully that's going to triumph no matter what.
Well, I to me the Bible is a book that has been changed around by men for thousands of years.
Hmm.
Um, I try and take it as you get out of it what you put into it. There's some good life lessons.
Yeah, there are, and
Uh,
there's some beautiful poetry.
there
There's
is.
some good history. I mean, how accurate it is, that remains to be seen. But it there are evidence of things that have happened, certainly. But as far as like spiritual truths, no. I mean, the church doesn't can't even agree. I mean, the four gospels don't even agree with one another. How many people were at the tomb? How many angels were in? What? Where is it? And they can't even agree. Like, okay, the tribulation is, when does God come back? Pre, post, during tribulation? Revelation, was it written for as a message to future generations, or was it really written and aimed toward first century Christians? They don't even know. And so God hasn't magically shown up and said, oh, this is prophecy or this isn't. So the fact that there's been crickets for the last 2,000 years is kind of damning, you know? Well, it should be anyway.
Nina wants to know: are there any characters based on real people in your book? Uh,
Not toxic.
it,
Not toxic's nonfiction, but I do have characters based on real people in my other books. Yes. Um, I have like an amalgam of people. Like in my first book, which is a cozy mystery, it the main character is a lot of me. I mean, my memories or the character's memories are based on my time growing up in the town that she's living in, a fictitious version of Vermilion, Ohio. So a lot of the things that she writes about or she has memories of are my memories. And her grandma in that book, or her kind of adopted grandma, is based on my grandma as well. So the relationship that they have and the kinds of things that character says are definitely pulled from my grandma, which helps me feel close to her when I write. She's gone now, never got to read these books, but I can hear her, from somewhere kind of laughing like, now Mark Allen, don't you be telling all my stories, stuff like that. So, yes, but I do like to base some characters on real people because it helps me feel connected and know how to write that character. Others are complete wholesale, like I invent them wholesale and don't know really what they're going to be until they talk. In the cozy, there's a news reporter who's kind of based on the character actor Jesse Smith, who I love, and I imagine him already wearing this like mustard yellow shirt that's got stains on it, and he's always got this kind of a stub of a cigar chewing on. He's really obnoxious, and he's like a gadfly. I'm like, oh yeah. And as soon as they started talking, I'm like, yes, I know this guy immediately. um, the same thing happened in my last book, Death's Head, which is a pulp action horror. There's a villain in the book, and I really didn't know much about him other than when I invented him, but only when I gave him that first line that he like fully developed. Like, oh, I know exactly how to write this guy. He's by far probably my favorite character to write. He's just tremendously fun. So there you go.
so, uh, yeah, you're more of a horror author than
Not necessarily. I mean,
no.
my movies were all comedies, but they're horror and sci-fi. Like I write, and that's why I went from my first book was a cozy mystery, which I'd never even read a cozy mystery before I wrote the thing. Um, but I like the Hallmark Christmas movies, and that's what this is in a sense. It's like, yeah, it's one of my, I won't say guilty pleasure. I take no guilt in anything. Um, but it was kind of like that. But I knew, because I have a history of writing horror, sci-fi, other kinds of like edgy kind of stuff, and I thought, I don't want to be known as a cozy mystery writer. I don't want someone to like grab me like in that Stephen King, was it with Kathy Bates, and like
Misery.
Misery, and like hobble me and say, you finished the series. So that's why my second book came out. It's a splatter western, called Hell's Revenge, or Gage Black Hell's Revenge, and it's about as far from the cute, sweet, sugary cozy mystery as you could. So I wanted that diversity. My second book to say, look, yeah, this is sweet and light, but that's not all I can do. I can write anything I want to write, and I really wanted to write a really violent, grim, bleak, dark revenge fantasy. Because, I mean, it's ultimately the Bible, right? It's God's revenge fantasy. You want to knock Satan up forever. Um, And so I really wanted to write something the opposite end. And then, so every book has been a little different. So now I'm back to the world of the cozy mystery because that's going to be a series of 4 books. But yeah, but it feels different now writing. I'm not like processing anything anymore. I'm just telling a story. And so it feels very different to write. Like I'm not in my head anymore. It's all out. And so now I can just tell a story. Maybe that's why I'm hesitant to continue. Like there's no motivation. There's nothing left to kind of deal with or process. Maybe I don't know.
Well, Nina says, "What is the most difficult part of writing a book?" So we're kind of
The
on that
writing,
topic there. The writing, yeah.
yeah, the doldrum uh, of the activity of writing. Like it's always fun to create and get an idea, and I love like getting my ideas and putting them into an outline and kind of seeing the big picture of the book. But it's like a marathon, and there is a tedious task of typing one word at a time and building these sentences and worlds that, because in your mind, at least the way I process writing, I've got it running in my head when I'm working on it, and I know where I'm going. And so by about 75% into a draft, the first draft, I'm tired. I'm done with it. Like, because I know how the last quarter is going to go. I've played it in my head 1,000 times. It's physically making my fingers type up those words just so I can get it done. It's like my legs are numb, but I'm going to keep on running. And so
Yep.
that's the worst part. I think the most difficult part is the tedium of actually writing, because it's unpleasant sometimes.
Well, here's a good question. I like this one.
Yeah.
What is the strangest thing you ever had to research online for your book?
Are we talking just Toxic or all the books?
Any book.
Any book.
Any book.
The strangest thing. Well, the books that I've done, like Gage Black is set right after the Civil War, and so I did research. I wanted to make sure that everything was accurate as far as like when the lines that the mail routes and the kinds of weaponry that were done, and Arizona, what was its place in the Civil War and after Civil War, and things like that. But I think probably the strangest research I had to do was for Death's Head, because it's set in the 1930s in and around Haiti, in a fictitious island near Haiti.
Ooh.
So there's a lot of voodoo and zombies and things like
Ooh.
that. And so researching the Loa and Baron Samedi and all those things was fascinating. I loved it because I'm an academic at heart, so I loved learning stuff. But that was probably the strangest stuff, learning about the religion voodoo, learning about all the different Loa and their personalities and what they do, and then putting that into the book so that it seems seamless and organic without shoving it down your face. Like I don't have to tell you what's happening. I can show you, but it's very faithful. I wanted to be respectful of that religion, and I wanted to be respectful of these deities, the Loa, in their religion, and so I really tried my best to represent their personalities and their religious beliefs as faithfully as I could. So there you go, Nina. I hope that answers your question.
I have to read that now because it sounds like a
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
fun.
fun.
It doesn't sell very much, but the people who buy it say, "Oh, I got a wonderful note. Like someone read it, and like literally, like at 1 in the morning, I got a text from her saying, "I just finished your book. I couldn't put it down. I want you to stop writing your cozy and write the sequel to this." I'm like, "Well, that's really sweet. Thank you." No, it's a pulp action horror. I wanted to write a book in a month. It wasn't that nano write, February stuff. I just like, no, I really want to see if I write a book in a month. And pulps are short, 42, 40, 48,000 words, and I'm like, oh, it's easy. I can definitely do that. But that's when I felt like different in writing, because Toxic was the last book that I had to process, 40 years of all this like ugliness coming out. But with Death's Head, I had a good story, but when I started writing it, I felt different. Like I'm not full of any kind of emotion at all. So I kind of felt nothing writing this book, even though I was listening to voodoo drums the whole time. I had a 5-hour track of voodoo drums, and I just play it. And right to that, I wanted to kind of feel like I was there. Uh, but I had like one good day when I was writing where I actually felt connected to my work, which, and that's really weird, because it's actually, when I read it again, it's dangerous to reread your work like a year later. I'm like, oh, I was expecting it to be garbage, but it's like, oh, this is pretty good. I don't remember writing most of the stuff. I know I did, because it's mine, got my name on it. Um, but I could tell the part that I felt connected to. I remembered that one scene, that day of writing. Like, I feel good about what I did today, but for the most part, I felt nothing, and that kind of has kept me like in a weird place. Like, I want to be able to feel something when I'm writing, and what do you do when you're not? So I'll talk with Stephen King about that. Maybe he can give you. He's a machine. Um,
But I've been having people ask me for another Kane book, and I know what I want to do with it. But I was thinking just last night, actually, I want to go back and reread the first Kane because I feel like he changed so much.
hmm
The character grew so much from the first book to the
hmm
third book, and I want to get back to the gritty Kane
Yeah,
of the first book.
sure. You
I,
have
I
to go
want
back to
that.
what
I
you're
want to
thinking.
bring his original
hmm
the original Kane back
Yeah,
more than he kind of got a little not wimpy, but more human.
yeah. Which doesn't
And
work for that kind of character.
no, and I don't like
Yeah.
I want to bring the real Kane back. In if I'm going to do another book with
hmm
him, I want him to be the Kane I started with.
Yeah, because you're a different writer there too. I think it's part
Yes.
of it, and then not to lean on Stephen King so much, but I do like what he has to say about writing because he said, you finish a draft, you got 2-3 months, because beyond that, you become a different writer by the end of your book. And that was my hard part going back into this fifth book, the second of the Cozy series. Like, I am not the same writer as I was a couple years ago. I'm in a different emotional place. It's like everything about me is different. But when I started working on it, I kind of fell into the town again and the rhythm of that language. So I know I can get back into it. Just like I have to force myself to do it. My 3 fans are going, "Hey, when are you going to finish that book?" So yeah,
Yeah, I need to reread it. It's been so long
isn't
that
it
you
weird though?
you
Like,
yeah, you
you reread the
almost
book.
forget. It is because you're like you think you know it, but when you go back and reread it, it's like I wrote this.
Yeah. Wow, this
And you
is not so bad.
forget so
Yeah.
much. Yeah, you forget so much of what was there. It
Yes,
was
the
like,
little parts, the details in the language, and
yes,
that's what surprised me going back and rereading, because that's what I did before I started working on the second of the series. It's been 3 years, or 4 years. I had written several books, three other books, and I'm going back to it, going, oh, okay, this is how this writes, because I can't approach the Cozy like I did Gage Black. I mean, that was just balls to the wall, complete id, 100% id, no holding back. And I think that's probably why it's my favorite book, because it's like, here's the complete me. This is unvarnished Mark Justice, how I want to write. um but no, I get it. It's weird, but you have to do that, and I with the Cozy, I know I'm trying to write for my audience, and I have a character arc over the 4 books. Like you mentioned, Kane, you want to get back to his gritty part. I'm using Maslow's hierarchy of needs to bring the main character Abby from the beginning book, the first book, where she's at her lowest, all the way to book 4, where hopefully she'll be fully actualized by then. So that's why book 2, she's moved beyond her base needs, and now she's looking at relationships with others and where does she fit in all this, and she's way too much in her head, because that's kind of the next state up, trying to figure out the bigger world. So I'm trying to show this through her muddledness, as she's going, and then trying to help use that as a story. But I love that as a construct.
uh, Nina wants to know who are your favorite authors.
um Well, and I will answer also her other question. What kind of music do I listen to? I like all kinds of music, mostly heavier music, heavy metal. But I also love progressive metal, prog rock. Bands like Rush probably is my favorite. Iron Maiden. But I also, part of the show that I do, Heavy Metal Horror, we interview artists. So I've become aware of this wonderful underground metal scene, that bands that are every bit as good as the ones you might have heard about, but they just don't get the success. But they are just killing it when they go out. Bands like Deceased, Lady Beast, Assault, things, these kinds of bands, Violence, that are just really, really good. So I like all kinds of music, and I listen to music when I write. It really depends on what I'm writing. So when I'm writing the Cozies, there's a radio station that plays nothing but 30s music, so I listen to 30s music. When I was listening to Death's Head, or writing Death's Head, listened to like voodoo drums and singing and chanting. But anyway, That's what I do. Authors I read, my favorite writers, that has changed over the years. But Robert E. Howard was probably my first writer I really fell in love with, and he's a fiction, a pulp writer of the 1930s. He wrote the character Conan. Probably, maybe if people are familiar with it. There's been no good movie version of it, um, of the character. He did a lot of pulp horror. I love H.P. Lovecraft. Just his weird, the way he writes and the horror stuff he writes is good. I love Mark Twain for his humor. Oscar Wilde for his humor. Frank Herbert, maybe one of the most gifted science fiction writers. I love the Dune series. That made me fall in love again with reading and how to write sparingly but poignantly. Like he's not overly verbose like Stephen King. Um, I liked King when I was younger. I have not read a King book since Pet Sematary. So I tried reading like The Regulators, but I like after a chapter, I'm like, no, I'm already bored of that. So I love comic books. So I love reading comic books. So that's where I can do a lot of my reading anymore. So
Just a silly little side thing.
Yeah.
With Rush and the Bible.
Nice. Yeah. Let's bring it back to Toxic.
Uh, when I was younger, I've always listened to metal, and my grandmother was a very religious woman, and she used to listen to like religious talk radio. And one day, my mother, my grandmother, and I are sitting around in the living room, and she had her religious talk radio on, and they're preaching about it was back in the days of Tipper Gore and
Oh yeah, the PMRC.
yes,
Yeah.
and they're talking about Rush, and he said they're taking this heavy metal and just shoving it down the kids' throats, and but he said it that the way he said it, I don't know how to say this. He said it had a sexual content to it somehow. And my mother and I just burst out laughing. And my grandmother got so pissed off at us. But yeah, he said they're sexualizing this for children. They're just taking it and shoving it down the kids' throats. And he was using a Rush song for an example.
Yeah, there's like nothing sexual about Rush at all. I think Rush is nerd music.
It really is
progressive rock. There's nothing. I don't think they except
the
for their
subdivisions is really sexual.
Yeah, right. Their first album has a song about like being with someone, but that's the pre Neil Peart. When Neil Peart comes in, he starts writing. I think what we can really call Rush. That really evolved then, but he had other things he wanted to say. He was writing story songs, and you write science fiction like By Tord and the Snow Dog, and fantasy, like science fiction like Red Barchetta. So that's why I fell in love with Rush, the same way I fell in love with Iron Maiden, because they weren't doing the Kiss thing. Yeah, I want to get laid. Like, yeah, I get it. That's great. But Iron Maiden comes in writing stories about mythology and history and literature. I'm like, oh, who are these guys? And that's why I really love bands that are doing something a little different. It's not just like, Motley Crue. I had Shout at the Devil. It's a great album. But 40 years later, I think I want to hear more things, different things. Exciting bands like Sermon, what we've interviewed on Heavy Metal Horror, of Golden Verse is phenomenal. Shaolin Death Squad, which is like a great progressive melodic metal band that has elements of clean and death metal vocals and blast beats, and just it's such an interesting stuff. Like Opeth and Ginger are both great bands that are like on the edge of like progressive, whether metal, melodic death metal. And it takes you on a journey, like emotionally, musically. I like that kind of stuff. I can't really listen to Motley Crue like today.
I'm done with the Motley Crue. I really am.
Yeah. Nothing against them. Hey, that's great.
I used to love the Motley Crue. I was a total Crue girl back in the
1984, they were great. 84 to 86, they rocked. But I have changed.
I have no time for it now. They just, and I even have them on my wall still. because my children, that my children created my email, Motley Mom. I used to be a total crew head, but they have disappointed me with the whole McMars thing. It's just such a disappointment.
Yeah.
But yeah, enough of that.
Yeah, I want to go back to this preacher who was thinking that Rush was being
Yeah,
sexualized.
it's just it
Well,
was
rock music in
hysterical.
general, right? It's the same argument that's being made today. It's like the kids are in danger of sex. Read your Bible, man.
Yeah, and it started with Elvis. Poor Elvis. We
Yeah,
went
he was the
around.
Antichrist.
Music has always been, the kids gonna just destroy the children always.
Yeah,
Uh,
and my rebellion against religion kind of started with music because I growing up in a Pentecostal church. We go to church camp, and every summer it was about the evils of rock and roll and burning records and all those Nazi things, and having done that myself, I look back and like, you know, but that's just kind of a rallying cry. It's something that we're going to say it's always a threat to the children, because they're the most vulnerable. But if a song is going to make you stop having your faith, then maybe your faith isn't that strong. We could not listen to anything secular at all. No secular music. So you're listening to all this garbage Christian rock, Petra and things like that are just like terrible.
Striper.
Striper, I like Striper, but I have a hard time listening to it. Like, it just, come on. Does everything have to be Jesus? Jesus, I brush my teeth with Jesus paste. That it was like, okay, if we cannot have anything secular, I'm like, when I go eat at McDonald's, am I worshiping Satan because that's not a Jesus burger? I mean, I began poking holes in, like, wait a minute, you're being a hypocrite. You're working in a secular place during the week. Is that, you're not out preaching the gospel? Yeah, it's all, I am just completely neurotic. So 40 years of abuse and spiritual rape that have just kind of left me, scarred for life. But that's what I love talking about it because it helps get it out of here. It comes out.
My grandmother gave me a little thing to hang on my wall when I was a child. It was a little sunshine picture, and it said, "God loves you so much He can't keep His eyes off of you." Now I was like 7 or 8. This thing terrified me.
Yeah, watching me sleep, right?
Yes, I was afraid that everything I did, if I did one bad thing,
yeah,
God was going to see me and punish me.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And
yeah.
That's the kind of thing you can't raise a child to be absolutely terrified of Jesus and God and the whole thing. That's where the whole thing starts to go downhill real fast.
Yeah. I was living in terror of missing the return of Jesus, because every time that the news brief came on, something about the Middle East, I'm like, oh, it's Bible prophecy. How it's amazing how everything can be channeled, filtered in to like make it seem like it's prophecy when, that is not.
Oh yeah,
bad things
like
happen.
Obama came. Oh, no, he's the Antichrist. Obama's the Antichrist. Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, folks. I know. It's like, oh, come on. Did you not read your Bible? The fact that Christians in America think the Bible has anything to do with America just shows the level of conceit and arrogance that is like, the Bible's written for me. No, it wasn't written in English. I'm sorry. You didn't exist. Everything in the Bible, the whole world that Caesar taxed was in a little tiny microcosm around the Mediterranean. That was it. That was no other. It went to Asia Minor, and that's it. That's the whole world. Sorry, kids, the old Roman Empire. That's the extent of the God of the Bible. So any American Christians thinking that God and all these things in Daniel and Ezekiel are meant for Christians or America, and America has some place in prophecy, that's just arrogance and conceit. Like, no, there's no place.
Just the KKK. They're all about Jesus, but
Right, because the Bible's all pro-slavery. Jesus doesn't say don't have slaves. Jesus says just treat them nicely. Don't beat them too much.
Well, I just mean that they don't care for black people, and yet Jesus was not a white man, folks. I hate to tell you that.
True, right? But the Bible has been used as an agenda or as an excuse for saying that slavery is okay. So, I mean, I guess they all, and the Catholic Church takes that whole like child sex thing seriously because it's the NAMBLA convention on the earth. So, yeah,
It all comes down to how people choose to interpret things.
yeah. And then we
And
got to go to where
like I
God
said,
is.
I choose to take the stories from it and try and find a positive lesson there, because it is so well. I remember saying to my grandfather, um, uh, something about I was young, and I said about um, Grandpa, what's paradise? Well, that's where we go when we die. Well, I thought we go to heaven. Well, we go to heaven after we go to paradise. Okay, then why does everybody say we go to heaven? So what happens when we die? We go to paradise. Then why does everybody say we go to heaven? When you're arguing with a child, they're like a
Right.
dog
They
with a
can't
bone. They're
say, they
not going to
can't,
let
yeah.
go of this. You
And that's all based
explain
off of
this
one
to me.
story. Here's this
Yes.
place. Right. I remember the whole doctrine that arose from that. It came from
So
this one
yeah,
story. Yeah.
children are the worst because they will hold you to a question.
Well, that's
And
what's great about it because they don't have the indoctrination all fully taken yet, and they see the whole. That's where I'm grateful for children who are critical thinkers. Let them be critical thinkers. Let the church make answer the questions for the kids. But right, it's all a doctrine. It's yeah. Anyway, I don't want to repeat myself. So I lived your life too. We had a very similar upbringing in a lot of ways. It seems
yeah, we did. Um, it's amazing, isn't it?
scary. Yeah.
Thank you for cults.
Yeah, I don't see anything good in religion at all, no matter what the religion is. It's all meant for control, and I think it's just an excuse. It started from superstition, like all the beliefs in demons and things like that. Where they came from, and or it's the demon of miscarriage. I'm like, no, miscarriages happen. You just made up something that is a good reason for it. Christianity is full of spirits. It's the spirit of lying. It's the spirit of smoking. It's the spirit of masturbation. Um, everything is a spirit. It's like fucking Pocahontas. Colors of the Wind. We can watch the Disney show. Everything's alive, and it's just excuses for everything. That's all it is. And I know the Christians are going, but I know demons are real. Like, well, maybe there are things that we can't see because we have a limited spectrum. With our eyes, we can't see everything, and I'm sure there are other beings that maybe can live on other planes of existence. That makes more sense to me. Some kind of alien entity shows up, and aliens, just because they have technology doesn't mean they're good. They might be just assholes, just like people. So maybe that's where all it comes from. But I don't believe in like spiritual wickedness or demonic forces or angels. I think if anything, the angels in the Bible are probably just misunderstood ancient astronauts, ancient aliens. That makes far more sense to me than some kind of spiritual being that God created, and now they're bound in the earth, and now they're going to come back out, and God's going to lock Satan away for 1,000 years, then let him back out again. It's just ridiculous. Like, make up your fucking mind. What's the whole point of all this?
Okay, so
How do I
Nina,
handle negative reviews?
yes.
Great. I will tell you the best review I ever got. Well, sometimes I'll get the occasional like 1 star, but nothing written about it, and I'll write back, well, what didn't you like about it? I don't care that you didn't like it. I think it's fine. I don't mind if people don't like it because I write for myself ultimately, Nina. If people like it, that's great, but you can't control what other people like or not. But the best review I got was from Toxic, and the guy said, well, he agreed with a lot of it because he grew up in that kind of environment. But he said there were too many F-bombs, so he couldn't give it more than like 2 or 3 stars. So I wrote back, I'll go, what the fuck's wrong with that? And just left it at that. Like, come on, you have to have a sense of humor about these things. Um, I'm grateful when people like what I write. I really am. I do appreciate that. But if they don't like it, I'm like, okay, read something else. Okay, but thanks for reading that. I can't help what you like and what you don't like, and I'm not going to write to try to appease a theoretical reader. if I'm happy with the story, that's all that matters. If I'm happy with the writing and it's to the best of my ability, then I don't give a I don't give a fuck what everyone else thinks is great. But I just want to write for me.
I think one of the best things I learned in life was how to laugh at myself. If I take myself too seriously, I'm just miserable.
Yeah,
You have to learn to laugh at yourself.
exactly.
Otherwise, you're just a very unhappy person.
Yeah, and I spent most of my life being unhappy, and I don't want to do that anymore. You
No,
know? Yeah. It's like no, I don't have time. It's like yeah, I'm okay. I'm in a much better place. I'm happier. I don't feel the burden and guilt of eternal damnation weighing over me anymore. So I'm like, this is what it feels like to not have that on you. You know? Yeah.
I have gone way over showtime today.
Well, how long is showtime normally?
uh, uh, 30 minutes.
Oh, I was thinking like an hour. I'm like, we got 10 more minutes to kill.
So why don't I'll do the news, and then we can have a little chat. Um, so for the news this week, folks, on Monday night we have Janelle LaSalle, and we're going to talk about her book, Holy Fucking Shit. Now that sounds like an interesting book there. Wednesday we have L.E. Martin. Friday we have Sarah Hurst, and Saturday we have Renee Pellegrino. It
Wow.
sounds like I am going to be reading and
Yeah.
very busy this week.
You are very busy.
Woo!
And I've got a whole
Alrighty
bunch of nothing
then.
going on. So look at that. I didn't mean to keep on going over. I thought this was an hour show.
No. We usually do about a half an hour, but if we
Okay.
go over, I don't sweat it. It's
I'm
not
that
a thing.
engaging. I'm just that much more entertaining. Yeah. I appreciate the people writing questions. Nina, thank you for writing all those questions in.
Oh,
And-
there will be more. There's a lot of people who don't. Oh, thank you, Josephine. Says great interview.
Oh, thanks.
We usually have a lot of people pop up after the show. It is, a Saturday morning. People
Yeah, I
like
get
to
it.
sleep in.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know what sleeping in is if somebody, handed it to me. I'm up half the night, and I sleep about 2 or 3 hours a night.
After
if
a while,
I'm lucky.
Yeah, it's a terrible. Insomnia is a terrible thing.
It is. I once wrote a poem to my lover, Insomnia.
Yes.
It's just crazy.
But I when I have real bad insomnia, I enjoy cannabis. I take some indica, and it helps me get sometimes relaxed. It doesn't always do it. Sometimes I'm just high and I'm sleepy, and I can't go to sleep. But I often use the cannabis for medicinal effects, and that can maybe be helpful to you as well.
I tried it one time. One time they convinced me that I needed to try it for my migraines.
Okay.
I sat here, ate a whole box of Famous Amos cookies, and stared at the wall for 3 hours and decided this was not a good thing for me.
Okay. Was it an edible or was it, did you have like flour or what, or cart?
I ate like half of a gummy bear.
Oh, okay.
And
yeah.
I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably should never try this again. I'm just sitting at a big old box of Famous Amos.
Yeah, I get it.
Okay. Yeah.
Some strains will give you the munchies. Yeah, and it depends on how strong that edible was. No, I get it. I like the mild edible. If like 5 milligrams for my edibles, it's just enough to I can feel the effect, but it's not over the top. And I can always smoke on top of that if I want to alter it. But
yeah, I would never get anything done. I would just sit here and end up weighing about 600 pounds.
If you get a sativa, we can go a whole interview on cannabis. If you get a sativa, it's what I'm smoking right now. A sativa is more euphoric and mentally uplifting. You'll be alert, you'll be awake, you won't be all crazy and spinny. You can get paranoid if you have too much, but I find that I have 2 sativa strains that I smoke when I write now, because sometimes it doesn't help me push through writer's block. I don't have that. I have writer's apathy. So it's like, whether I write like,
writer's apathy. There's a good one. I'm going to have to remember that.
And so the sativa helps energize me in a way that when I'm writing, like 2 hours will go by without even like batting an eye, like, oh man, that was quick. And I'll have gotten, oh, you got 2,400 words in today. I'm like, oh, well, that's just fantastic. Thank you. So maybe a sativa won't give you the munchies like some of the indicas will. If you're just staring at a wall and you're just eating, that's probably a an indica on the indica level, but sativas will help you feel uplifted, like having a third cup of coffee or something.
Yeah, see, the family's always trying to find different ways to get me through my migraines.
Yeah, there are other strains that are just for pain, and I'll send you a list of cannabis strains, about 180 of them, and some of them have, well, there are about 7,000 strains out there.
Oh,
Way
geez, really?
way 6,000, I think. Yeah, way too many to smoke or try. Although God knows I'm going to work my way through as many as I can. Um, God knows, see, that's funny. Uh, but there are some that definitely will help with pain management. I have friends who have like fibromyalgia, and there are some strains that are really, because now they're so particularly made, and hybrids are made, and it's all genetically, uh, botanists are making these wonderful strains, and they're making them for certain effects. So because there are so many strains, some have a lot more pain reducing abilities. They have a lot more CBD. So if I were you, I would try one from Loom, in Michigan is where I go. It's called Recover. It's got a 4-to-1 ratio of CBD to THC. It won't get you super high. You'll be relaxed, not hungry, but the CBD is kind of like natural ibuprofen. So I would recommend a high CBD strain. But
Oh,
I'll send you the list when we're done.
oh, thank you.
Yeah, the
Thank you.
ones in red are the
It
ones I would
helps
take.
with these miseries.
Yeah, for
It's just
sure. Yeah,
like a
anything that would.
vice on the top of the head.
Oh,
It's terrible. They keep
I'm
putting
sorry.
me in tubes and scanning my brain and finding nothing. I said that, and people were like, "Oh, well, of course they find nothing. There's nothing in there."
Just an
But
empty head. Is that what they're saying?
yeah,
Yeah. Well, yeah. I hope they can. I have
it's
some friends
awful
who,
when you're like, "Please find something wrong with me so you
chronic
can
pain.
fix it."
Yeah, it's a terrible thing. I've got other friends who are stricken with migraines, and it's a terrible thing. It's completely debilitating.
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll lay in the dark for like 2 or 3 days and just hide. It's
yeah.
it's
It's a
miserable.
right. Yeah,
Ugh.
horrible.
Okay, well, now that we have even covered, let's see, religion, uh, rock and
Yeah,
roll,
yeah.
and
Cannabis.
and cannabis,
What more did we
it's
want?
been a heck of
Not
a
not in
show,
one not in one
folks.
interview. My goodness, we could go on for days.
The only thing we missed was sex.
What's that?
Yeah. I
Yes,
don't
yeah. With
know.
all the guilt. Yes, sex without guilt. That doesn't happen, right?
We didn't hit on all the 7 deadly sins. Okay. Well, I'm going to sign off and thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Mark. And
My
a
pleasure.
big thank you to my Nina, who hangs in there and puts up with my crazy on a daily basis. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, Beth.
Oh, thank you. Okay.